Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on this video. We're going to be talking about the Nashville Number System today. So what is the Nashville Number System? It's not a different set of chords. It uses the chords that we already know. It's just a different way of talking about the chords that we already know and love. Basically, each chord, instead of having a letter, now has a number. And we'll talk about how that works and the advantages of that a little bit later. But let's get into why I want you to do this, like why I want you to know the Nashville Number System if you don't already. A few reasons, kind of broad philosophical reasons. One, it's good for everyone to use the same language when we're collaborating. It's good to all be on the same page, use the same term for everything, and the term will always mean what it has meant, right? So everybody will be using the same language to talk about the same concepts, and that will avoid a lot of confusion. It's also commonly used outside of this church and even outside of the church community. Musicians at large use the Nashville Number System to communicate about music. So if you start playing gigs somewhere else, or maybe you have been for a while, or just collaborating with other musicians, you'll probably hear this language used. So hopefully by taking the time today to kind of get into it, you'll start to have an understanding of what it is they're talking about when they start speaking numbers instead of letters. The third thing is that I believe it will enhance musical proficiency. I think the Nashville Number System allows us to see some really cool connections between chords and between keys, and unlock some really cool sounds and some really cool ideas that will enhance your playing. So why the Nashville Number System for our church? One, it reduces confusion about keys, especially when somebody is using a capo. So it's a pretty common thing that if we're playing a song in like B flat, the guitarist will be using a capo, probably capo 3, playing G shapes. Now, if I am playing keys and I'm talking to the guitarist and they're playing guitar in G, I'm playing in B flat, they're playing in G. If I say, hey, go to an E flat chord there, they're gonna be like, what do you mean I don't have an E flat chord on my page? Because they're seeing a different key. So by using numbers, I can say, hey, go to a 4 chord, and they're like, okay, got it. And now we're playing what sounds like the same chord, and we're thinking about it in the same way. It's easy to do last-minute key changes, kind of for that reason. We don't have to switch the music around like in Planning Center. You don't have to pull up a different key, because all the keys, if it's the same song, will have the same numbers. And third, like I mentioned earlier, it's gonna unlock some music theory wizardry for you that hopefully you're gonna be able to use to become a better player. And that's what I want for you. I would love for each one of you to become a better player. And I wish that for myself too. And I think this is one way, if you don't already know the system, this is one way that will enhance your playing. So let's get into the mechanics of how the Nashville Number System actually works. We're gonna be using the key of C major for now as an example to help us visualize this. So in the Nashville Number System, each chord, instead of having a letter, is represented with a number. So in the key of C, C is going to be our 1 chord. D is going to be our 2 chord. E is going to be our 3 chord. F, 4. G is our 5 chord. A is our 6 chord. B is our 7 chord. And then we're back around to C, which is our 1 chord again. So the way this works is that the majors and minors stay the same. So for instance, in the key of C, A will always be a minor chord, or almost always. I'm speaking in generalizations here. There are rabbit trails for pretty much everything I'm saying that you could get lost in. But I'm going to be speaking about what happens 90% of the time. In the key of C, A is going to be a minor chord. That stays the same in the Nashville Number System, but we call it a 6 minor instead. So let's talk about how this is going to be notated. It's a lot like if you're familiar with reading letters on our chord sheets. It's a lot like that. It's just that there's a number now instead of a letter. So instead of seeing like A minor 7, it's just going to be notated as 6, and then a lowercase m to indicate minor, and then a 7 to indicate that extension on that chord. So nothing really new there. It works generally the same as it has before. The big change is that it's a number now instead of a letter. Now the numbers also represent how the chord naturally appears in the key. So for instance, let's switch keys in our brains here. So now we're in the key of F major, right? F is our 1 chord, G is our 2 chord, A is our 3 chord. And now in the key of F, we don't have a B natural, we have a B flat. So when we write 4 and we're in the key of F, we know to play a B flat chord. And we won't play a B major chord unless the chart specifically indicates play a sharp 4 chord here. So that's our clue to raise that up a half step. But by and large, if you're in a key with sharps or flats, those stay the same. And it's just indicated by a normal number. So it won't really have a sharp or a flat next to that number. Now let's talk about what chords we're going to be seeing. In worship music, there are really 4 primary chords. And you probably know this if you've been playing for any amount of time. You started to notice that a lot of songs will use similar patterns, and most songs will only use 4 or 5 different chords. Those big 4 chords are the 1 chord, right? So that's like our home base. That's like the chord that the key is in. Our 5 chord, our 6 minor chord, and our 4 chord. And sometimes you get the 2 minor chord in there as well. And very rarely you get the 3 minor chord. But by and large, there are 4 big chords that you will find. Here's the kicker. If you can remember those 4 big chords in every key, then you're pretty much set for life. So if you can know what the 1, 5, 6, and 4 are in every key, then you will be like a titanium plated church musician. You will never need another chord chart again if you can know and understand and hear the 4 big chords in any key. So for instance, in the key of C, I know that C is my 1, G is my 5, A minor is my 6, F is my 4. Let's take the key of A flat. In the key of A flat is my 1, D flat is my 4, E flat is my 5, and F minor is my 6. So if you can get to that point, and that's just a lot of practice, that's a lot of repetition, and seeking out those connections. So when you're playing, even if you're playing with letters, be thinking about what number would this chord be, right? And you'll start to build those connections. And then eventually you'll be able to wean yourself off of letters entirely. The other thing is, if you listen for it, you'll start to hear it. You'll start to hear how in any key, the sound from a 1 chord going to a 5 chord sounds the same. It serves the same function, right? So it might be a higher or lower pitch depending on what key it's in, but a C to a G is going to sound the same as a D to an A, or the same as a B to an F sharp. Those are all the same relationships, right? That's always going to be a 1 to a 5 chord. It's just in different keys. So if you're starting to listen to music and play music with the relationships between chords in mind, then you'll be able to unlock kind of the potential to hear chord changes without having to see them, and then playing by ear. Have you ever seen someone who could just listen to a song for 30 seconds and then play that chord progression on the piano or on the guitar or whatever they happen to be playing? That's what they're doing, is using some version of the number system. So let's talk about applications of the Nashville number system a little bit. Transposing. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but the numbers never change. For a given song, the numbers never change. So let's actually take a look at this. I'm going to pull up an example song. So let's take a look at the song Who You Say I Am by Hillsong. Now, when we're looking at this chart, if we're using letters, every key is going to have different letters. That's kind of obvious. If we're using numbers, however, we'll find that the numbers are always the same no matter what key we're in. So if we're in the key of E, for instance, our 1 chord is going to be E. So we see it starts with a 1 chord. And this is where the memorization comes in. There is a little bit of memorizing here. But once you get it down, and it's honestly not that bad, once you get it down, it will actually free you up to do a lot more things. So we need to know that in the key of E, our 6th chord is going to be C sharp minor, okay? And then we have a 5 chord, that's going to be B, and then back to a 1, that's going to be E major. Now, if we were playing this song, let's say someone is feeling a little bit under the weather and we need to bring it down a whole step. Now we're playing it in D major. We can look at the same chord chart, but now just interpret it through the lens of D major. Does that make sense? So looking at the intro, it still says 1, But now we know that D is our 1 chord, so we're going to play D for our intro. Now looking at verse 1, again, we're going to play D as our 1 chord. Looking at the 6th chord, we're going to play B minor for our 6th chord, A for our 5 chord, and then back to D for our 1 chord. So here's what I would recommend. It all kind of comes down to knowing your scales. If you know the notes in your scales for each key, you will be able to figure out, even if it's not fast at first, even if you have to kind of sit there and count it out, you will be able to know what each chord is in each key. So for instance, now let's say we're playing it in C. I know that C is my 1 chord, easy enough. The key is always the 1 chord. So if we're in the key of C, our 1 chord is always going to be C. Our 6th chord is going to be C, D, E, F, G, A. I know my 6th chord is going to be A, and I know it's going to be minor, so I'm going to play an A minor there. Now our 5 chord, C, D, E, F, G. I know my 5 chord is going to be G, and it's going to be major. Our 4 chord is going to be C, D, E, F. F is going to be our 4 chord. And you can do this in any key, regardless of whether they're sharps or flats. But that's kind of the method, and it all comes from knowing your scales. So if you don't know your scales, this is my official invitation to you to spend some time, practice your scales, at least know what they are. Even if you can't play them super fast, just know what they are so that you're able to get to these chords. So that's the Nashville Number System. I kind of blazed through that, so if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about music theory and just talk to people. So if you have any questions at all, please let me know. I hope this was helpful. Have fun messing around with this idea, and I'll see you on Sunday.